But now I'd like to invite Stangeland Kaufman from the Norwegian School of Theology, Religion, and Society. And Tuna, your work is on reflexivity. So would you like to share with us a bit about your work, just in general, but also the work that you're doing in the chapter for the book?
Well, thank you, first of all, for inviting me into this conversation and into the book. I've been doing qualitative work for about maybe 15, 17 years, almost 20 years. It's been the thing that I've done mostly lately, and especially on various Christian or religious practices. And for my doctoral studies, I studied the spirituality of pastors in the Church of Norway. And it's been a long kind of way of learning new things all the time and reflecting on it. And it's interesting also to listen to Pete and John and their work, and also their passion about theology in this, because I was trained as a theologian, but then it feels like I've been away on a long journey to the kind of lands of social science, and then I'm trying to find my way back and negotiating how this looks like from my vantage point and in my context, which is different from the UK context. So it's certainly debatable what both Pete and John said, but for my chapter about reflexivity, it felt like I was like, this is the most kind of open, all-encompassing chapter in the book almost. And so I could write about nothing and everything. And one of the things that I wanted to do was to try to unpack the concept, because it is coarse meshed, and it can be a lot of things. So trying to unpack it was part of what I wanted to do. But it's also a lot about trying to invite us to detect and discover our blind spots and our default modes, so to speak. What is it that we just take for granted, whether it be kind of our spiritual or ecclesial default mode or academic default mode, or when it comes to social location, epistemology, what is in a way our interpretive repertoire that is part of what we see. So trying to address that was part of what I wanted to do in the chapter, and also to acknowledge what Jaco Dreyer, South African colleague, wrote in a chapter in the Conundrums volume that came out in 2016, where he also argued that reflexivity is in a way a conundrum. It's kind of a catch-22. So even our reflexive efforts are in a way biased. How can we see that they're not? And so as Natalie Stevenson says, reflexivity in a way never stops. So trying to get around that dilemma, conundrum was also part of what I was trying to do in the chapter, not solving it, but at least trying to address it. Yeah.
Thank you. So thinking about reflexivity and the bias, the conundrum, the challenges that come along with it, and the work that you're doing to move the conversation forward, what are your hopes? You know, someone picks up your chapter, engages with it. They've been struggling with this themselves. What are your hopes?
My hopes would kind of be that it would give them some language to help organize, help see things that they might not be aware of before. Maybe give some language to it, and to point them to some literature in the field that could be helpful. It was hard to do the literature review for this chapter because it's immense. It could have been everything, and we only had 5,000 words, including the literature list. So that was also a bit hard. But also to see how reflexivity is in a way also related to what we do in the academy, not only to writing the dissertation or writing a piece of research, but that it's also has got to do how we, a way of being in the academy and our way of relating to one another. I'm teaching a class for undergrad students where they do their first kind of qualitative, they write a paper on where they do qualitative research, a small piece only. But we were having a seminar this week, and they, several of them reported how meaningful they found it, and how it also made them reflect on who they were and what they took for granted. And I had really taught a bit about reflexivity before they went out and did their interviews, because I also think that reflecting on this and what our biases are, what our default mode are, is also helpful in terms of coming into an ecclesial context. And these students are training to become ministers, pastors, and to see, and when they meet different people with different faith stories and different experiences, being able to reflect critically about their own vantage points and what they take for granted and not, what their kind of more implicit normative values are, that is also helpful in that sense. And so students have commented on that. And I think reflexivity, practicing reflexivity, as I entitled the chapter, really is a help to engage one another, especially people that come from a different position, different context, different place, where I think we can, when we can become more aware of what we ourselves are usually blind to, and what we kind of by default mode dislike or like, to listen to others with what I've called an empathic curiosity, to try to really understand where the other person comes from, whether that be an interviewee or a research participant, or whether that be someone that we encounter in our church where we pastor. I think that is, or in class when students from different positions meet up. I think that is important, and it can be of great help in many different settings. Yeah.
Tuna, would you mind saying a bit about how you encourage those practices, even in your own work in the classroom? You know, I'm thinking of someone who might be advising a researcher. How do you help someone listen with empathetic curiosity? What are the skills that we have to develop in ourselves?
Well, I think one just little exercise that I do with students often is I would name a bunch of different words that could be charismatic worship, or it could be feminist theology, or decolonial theology, or it could be majority mainline liberal church. It could be the Pride march. It could be all kinds of different things, or mission or evangelism. And I invite them to reflect on what these concepts or these words, how they feel about them, and what they like, dislike, what they hold dear, and what they kind of are skeptical towards. And then we share in class. And then sometimes they are a little surprised at the affection that they have when some of these concepts are named. And so we try to share some of these things. Also, at the school where I teach, we have classes on where students share their faith stories with one another, and that all is also classes that really help them listen to and engage with other people's stories, because I think often our own stories of faith stories, or ecclesial stories, or what Pete calls the effective gravitational pull of the church, some of these things kick in so often, implicitly, subconsciously. So to listen actively to people from other traditions or with other experiences. I think that can help develop that kind of empathy, and also just sharing. So for example, in my school, I think some PhD students would find it really awkward if I would invite them to pray, as John suggested. Others, I think, would find it great. But just this week, I met with a relatively new PhD student of mine. He is Danish, and we've met on Zoom before, but we haven't met in real life before. And we sat down and had lunch, and we also shared a lot of our own kind of spiritual backgrounds and faith journeys. And just sitting down doing those kind of things is, I think it's a way of understanding and getting to know one another also on this level. And so I think when he writes things, it's easier for me to also understand where he comes from, where he's coming from, and also to help pinpoint, well, here's some of your normative claims are just sipping out here and there, but you're not really, making them explicit or discussing them, or but also just because it's I like John said, I really believe in collaboration also when it comes to doctoral work, to collaborate with others, to invite in others into PhD projects, to ask others for their expertise, but also to invite people into our projects to see and listen and to listen from a different vantage point. I definitely think that the reflexivity conundrum perhaps might be best dealt with corporately, collectively, when we collaborate and share, and I also think that in the academy, which has been in a way an individual place, I think things are changing in that sense, that we can work in a way that fosters collaborative work, collaboration, building relationships, supporting one another, to build academic kind of milieus or places where that is possible, and where that is where that is kind of a virtue.
Yeah, I love that. I find myself inspired and encouraged listening to you, as similarly when I was listening to John. The way that you both are explaining or sharing about the importance of collaboration, and Pete talked about working together, presents a different model than perhaps some are used to when it comes to working with doctoral students, or even working with colleagues just in general. A different model for what research might look like. And that's what I'm hearing from the both of you. So Tuna, is there anything else you would want to add about your chapter or your hopes for the book before I invite Pete and John back in?
I hope that people will read the book, and I agree with Pete that there are many different voices in the book, so many different positions. I certainly think that people will disagree with various chapters, but I hope that the book will kind of spark a conversation, or continue this conversation, so to speak.